Okay. I've got you.
Look at us.
You all wrapped up.
I know. It's like I have all like a nice top on, but then I get cold and my big blanky poncho, I don't even know what it is.
It's nice to do that in Brisbane, hey? We don't get to do it very much.
So you're on the other end of this one because you're
I know. This is nice. Like I feel completely unprepared. Like we haven't spoken about this at all, so I have no idea what's coming.
No, and that's part of it. When you ring someone up, often this is why I'm scared the phone will ring. No one prepared me for that. What are you going to say? No, but just it's not. There's nothing to worry about. I feel bad now.
No, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. I'm actually in a very low chair. I'm in one of my grandmother's old chairs, so it's one of those very low, old-fashioned.
Oh, that's nice.
Chairs.
My grandma used to have a 3-legged chair in the foyer. It was always, well, I say foyer as in England, you know, the bit where you walk in and take your boots off and...
Yes. Foyer.
Entry.
That's a foyer.
I know, but foyer makes it sound grand. It was about 2 square metres. But they always had this 3-legged chair with a long wooden thin back. I don't really know where it came from. They travelled.
How does a 3-legged chair work?
Not very well. No one ever sat on it. No, you could sit on it, but we were scared to because it was precious to my grandfather and we didn't want to break it. But I still remember the 3-legged chair. How bizarre. Grandmother's chairs are a big thing.
Whatever happened to the chair?
I don't know now. I'm trying to think. Because he's passed away, but my grandma, who just turned 94, she's in a residential home where she's just got 1 bedroom with like a bathroom and stuff. So she has had to downsize like considerably. Yeah. So I don't really know. And because they're in England, we don't get to actually manage the belongings very much.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of your grandmother, was she in Stanthorpe? Did she? Because you hail from down in Stanthorpe Way. That's one of the ways.
I do hail from Stanthorpe, yes. And my grandmother passed away 2 years ago now, but she was 110. So I know. She was the oldest Queenslander.
That's epic.
I say that very proudly as if that had something to do with me. Of course, it has nothing to do with me. But hopefully I've got good genes. They say if you read a lot and you've got good genes, you live longer. So I'm set. I'm living till I'm, 110. So, yeah, she was my last surviving grandparent.
That's good innings, you know.
It was a good innings, yeah.
My grandfather
got 3 letters from the Queen.
3?
Yes, so you only get 1. She was quite disappointed to find out that you only get 1 every 5 years after you turn 100. You don't actually get 1 every year. And she was even more disappointed to find that the photograph was the same of the Queen. She didn't update her photo. She did, she thought
there might be reasons for that.
Yeah, there might be. As she gets older herself.
Yeah, that was it. So like the Golden Jubilee was also the Golden Jubilee of their marriage, and there was all these crossed over dates. And my grandfather was a diplomat, so they were there's a signed letter to say my grandfather is honourable to speak on behalf of the Queen, and from when she was very young and signed anything, obviously. God, no, he was honourable. He was very lovely as he spoke on her behalf around the world. But
yeah, my family's still there. My parents, my aunts, uncles.
When the fires were on is when I grabbed hold of you in Brisbane Library, in the State Library, walked over and raced over to you. You didn't know me. I mean, from Twitter maybe. I was like, "Are your family okay?" And you were straight to me. Are your family okay? Because the fires had raged through Stanthorpe first before anywhere else. And
they were bad. Yeah, at one point I had Mum and Dad. I was on the phone to them at about midnight or 1 a.m. and they were lying in bed just looking out the window, and everything was red out the window. And they live in town. They're not out on a farm.
Yeah, same as.
So that was quite scary, and just the no water and electricity cut off and all of that. So that was quite scary. But yeah, they're fine. Thankfully, they're all fine.
And made it through. And they've made it through the virus, okay?
They've made it through the virus.
You have one of your books behind you there. And
I have 2, actually. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, it's behind your head. There you go. I was going to say, where's the other? So we've got The Promised Seed.
Yeah.
And Parting Words.
And Parting Words, yes.
And do you want to tell me about them briefly, or is that something you do? I've never heard you talk about your work.
Oh, well, sure.
Because I'm kind of new. I'm new to the scene. From 2 years ago when I started getting into you mean people write books and looking at what goes on in that world. And so thank you for that, because you kind of brought me into what happens in author events.
Well, you came in with a huge splash, may I say. 1 minute you weren't there and the next minute you're like everywhere. All over Twitter.
I don't do anything lightly. So I'm a passionate person.
The Promised Seed was the first book, my debut novel. I'll just put my head to the side. So that is about... they're both literary fiction, I guess, and about families. So I seem to concentrate. I've found I like to write about families, how families function and or don't, dysfunctional families. Yeah. Themes like betrayal and forgiveness and love and loss and grief. So The Promised Seed is about an elderly man and the relationship that he develops with his 10-year-old neighbour. So the man has had quite a tragic incident in his past that's really shadowed his whole life and shaped the person that he's become. And the boy is a bit neglected and a bit of a loner. And they strike up a really beautiful friendship through simple things like playing chess and gardening and chickens. And as the story goes on, the boy is threatened and the man has to decide whether to help him or keep himself aloof, which is what he's spent his life doing because to avoid hurting himself. Yeah, so that's that book. So I like that story particularly because, there's so much at the moment. Well, always there's so much about friendships between older people and younger people. And
yes, we have elderly neighbours. Well, all our neighbours are elderly because we're in an area where people who built their houses here still live here, and we're the newbies.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is an interesting relationship that.
Yeah. And I just think it's so important to have those relationships for children. I think for children, you can't have too many adults who love you. So, whether or not your family is there for you, it's important to have extended family and friends and neighbours and other people that just kind of look out for you. And so I really wanted to explore that sort of relationship that's looked on with suspicion sometimes, but that is actually a really healthy and probably 100 years ago would have been quite a natural thing, but now we're a bit more nervous about that sort of thing.
Yeah, and when I didn't grow up with grandparents in the same country because mine are overseas, elderly people that you come across and draw into your family, that's the only way that we had those relationships, and life would have been much poorer without them. And one thing I miss, I'm not religious now, but I did grow up in the church, and I wrote in a very early piece, I wrote about someone who wrote her in basically, was an elderly lady who used to talk to me, in a way that no one else ever would have, and think she understood things that no one else understood. And
I think that older people have a lot to learn from younger people and vice versa. So I think that can be a really symbiotic relationship that's of real benefit to both, and particularly when it's not family. There's a lot of baggage that goes along with being family, being the parent, being the grandparent, that is just absent when you don't have those connections.
And so The Promised Seed was taken very well. Do you know if it's studied in any courses? Like, do you go and talk to university students or anything?
I have done a couple of guest uni lectures, but I don't think it's on a curriculum. I know one person who included it as part of their PhD. They did 3 books and one of them was The Promised Seed. So that was kind of exciting.
It's good to have local literary fiction.
I think so. And that's one of the things with that book that people, with both my books actually, people really connected with the fact that they're both set locally. And you just don't get to read that many books that are set in your own, well, firstly in Australia, but then in your own state.
I don't think I read anything in all my years at uni before young adult fiction, or even then that was set. Apart from Peter Carey, we did his short stories with Kafka. I remember that. And I remember learning he was Australian and going, oh, what? Australians write too?
Yeah.
And
it's a bit of a shock.
But it's not exactly set in Brisbane. It's, they're kind of not like that.
No. I mean, I guess Nick Earls, was one of the first that really put Brisbane on the map.
Yeah, I don't know if it was on any, because my uni life straddled to the UK. I missed stuff that way a bit, probably. But yeah, hopefully, I assume everything's much better. That was 20 years ago, though, so there wasn't such support, I don't think, for Australian fiction in the institutions.
Well, I actually didn't do creative writing or
no, I didn't.
A master's or a PhD in creative writing like so many of my writer friends. So I kind of feel like that's a bit of an absence in my...
I didn't do creative writing, never once. No. I would have scared me. I just did analysis only.
Okay.
So I feel the same. I kind of think there's a whole world of knowledge there that I'm scraping to catch up on.
Yeah.
But we'll get to where we are.
I do feel like writers that I know that have studied literature or creative writing, the advantage for them is that they do get to spend a lot of time studying structure and form and reading, a lot of set reading that maybe you wouldn't otherwise read. And so I think there's a lot of value in that.
There was rarely that I came across one that was too upsetting, but I was younger. Now more things are upsetting, so I'm very, very wary of anything. But I think having kids does that. I don't know if you found that I've got more sensitive.
Yeah.
You did. Oh, okay.
When my kids were younger, I found it difficult to write about kids that were the same age as as my kids were. Yeah.
See, I'm doing that all the time. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't. No, but I worry that they'll think I'm writing them in.
About them.
Yeah. I'm like, it's not you, even though they're obsessively doing such and such that you do, you're wearing your headphones or...
I'm just mining you for material.
Yeah. I'm normally open about that. If they say something, I'll be like, you know what's going to happen now. And they're like, yes, Mum.
It's going in the book.
Or my 7-year-old says, you should tweet that. So, and parting words, tell us about...
So parting words is quite different. So it opens with a funeral. So Daniel Whitaker, who has just passed away at age 88, and he was quite wealthy, and he's got 3 adult children. And in the aftermath of his passing, they discover that his quite extensive estate has some conditions attached before it can be distributed to them, which revolves around a series of letters that he has written over his lifetime and left with his solicitor. And they're letters to people from his past, so people that he's wronged or people he's perhaps felt strongly for but not told them, or people he feels he has to apologise to, things to do with the war, a lot of different letters, 12 altogether. And his instructions to his solicitor are that his children have to find these people and hand deliver the letters to them personally, and that, or if the person that he wrote is no longer alive, to their descendants. And so that becomes the story over 12 months, is the 3 adult children who are in their 50s and 60s attempting to track down these people and then meet with them and give them the letter and see their response to their father's words. And in the process, the siblings find out a lot about their father that they didn't know, and a lot about themselves too. And there's a lot of, thinking about their childhood and,
Gosh, that always makes me worry that I'll find out stuff too late to ask.
Yeah, there's a bit of that in there, yeah. And one of the questions often I ask at book clubs is, do you think that was a brave, a good and brave thing for him to do, to leave those letters so that they could have a better understanding of his life? Or do you think it was a cowardly thing to do, to leave them until after he was gone? And it's interesting what people think about that. And it's interesting people's responses. Like you would think this is a fictional out there kind of idea, but the number of times I've done library talks or book clubs and people come up to me afterwards and say, that's my mother, or like that happened to me, or I discovered that my father had this whole other family that we didn't know about, or lots of great stories that come up and you think, wow, that's even stranger than the book.
Yeah.
Is stranger than fiction.
Totally. That's fascinating. You must find out such interesting things about people. There's a book club that are going to do my book soon.
Yeah.
What do you do? What is it? They said, you might have to come and I don't know if we'll be able to meet by then. We might have to Zoom, but I don't know if we'll do that. She didn't know what would happen. And I'm there going, great, sure, put my hand up. No clue. No clue. So they read your book.
Yes.
No one throws stuff at you though, and it's like, why would you
generally
do that?
Not. No. I love book clubs. Because they're different from launches and conversations like this, where you don't really want to give away too much of the plot. You don't want to give away any spoilers because they've all read it, of course. So it's open discussion, so they can they can really get into the nitty-gritty of everything, which is great. And just generally people are really happy to have the author there because they can ask a lot of questions about process and, where the story originated from. And mostly you get positive feedback, and the negative feedback that you get is actually really quite funny. So the funniest I guess negative feedback I had was I did a book club with the average age was I think about 85, but there was some in their 90s, and they were all quite elderly. And there was and they met at a library, and there was a woman there who I think was about 92, and this was parting words, and they all were going around in the circle when I first got there and saying, introducing themselves and saying something nice about the book, which was very lovely. And then it came to her, and she was just like this no nonsense, and she just said, well, I didn't like it. I said, oh, okay. What didn't you like about it? She said, well, it starts with a funeral. She said, I've got my own funeral to look forward to, any time. I don't need to be reading about funerals. I said, oh, okay, sorry. And then she proceeded to talk about some other things in the book that she didn't like. But what was the most interesting thing was that she, out of all those people, she knew that book inside out. She had read it. She knew every aspect, every conversation, every character. She could talk at length about, the characters that she disliked and what she didn't, what she didn't like about them. And, it was actually quite fascinating. And at the end, I said to her, it's okay. It's okay to passionately love a book or passionately dislike a book. Both of those things are great for an author. It's when the reader feels nothing. That's when you haven't achieved anything,
Yeah.
But if you've got a book where the characters really get under people's skin, or well, mostly I guess it's the characters, but even sometimes the plot, people just get really annoyed or passionate about it. I think that's a good thing because it means that you're moving people.
At least they have a reaction.
Yeah, they have a reaction. Yeah. If people just dismiss the book and forget about it, then I don't think that's a very good book.
Oh my goodness, though. To have that, at least if you're sitting there and you're doing the book club, you can react and speak back.
Yes.
Because it is hard when, something's said, but you can't speak back. You're not allowed to really if it's just public domain.
Yeah.
Thoughts, but you kind of want to go, but blah. There's no place for that.
You tend to want to explain yourself or explain why things are a certain way. But, I think as a writer, you just have to accept that your book is not going to be everything to everyone. I can't remember who said this, but someone on Twitter once said, and I often quote this, that your book doesn't have to be everything to everyone. It just has to mean everything to someone, and it can mean nothing at all to someone else. And I really like that. I like that, both of my books have people that they absolutely love them. They've really engaged with them. They love the characters. And they're not going to resonate with everybody. You know, everybody's taste is different, and you as a writer, you just have to accept that that's the case. You're never going to write a novel that's universally loved and appreciated.
But has anyone argued with you over what actually, and they're just actually wrong? So if they said, I don't know, Gina was Frank's auntie, and you're like, well, actually, no, Gina wasn't, and then they swear black and blue, no. Do you know what I'm, like, I've had this with teaching students for other things and things where they'll swear black and blue.
Yeah.
But it's to the point where you're going to have to get the book out and say, but on page
hello, I wrote it.
Yeah, you're getting the facts wrong here.
I guess the closest thing with that is the ending of The Promised Seed, which I won't give away in case people haven't read it. But the ending is a little bit ambiguous, which I love in a novel. I love an ambiguous ending. And that was one of the most interesting things, was that people had such differing responses to the ending. Some people really thought that something happened, and other people really thought that a completely different scenario happened. And I even got one email from somebody in I think it was a book club in Sydney, and she wrote and said, look, we're having this argument in our book club about what happens at the end of the book. I think that so-and-so kills this other character. Is that what happens? And it was like completely out of the blue kind of, and I said, well, usually I say to people, you know, now that you're reading it, it's your story, and, you know, whatever you think is the ending is, you know, but with her I had to say, I really don't think that happened.
I have a medical professional, not my own, one of my children's, who's a really big fan of yours.
Oh, really?
There's nothing I've ever said in an appointment that's made her look at me like a person, you know, as in she's very lovely as a professional. But me, like, separately from the children or whatever. But your name came up. I can't even think why now. And she went, really? Cass Moriarty? And she was just like amazed. So it's very exciting. You have some really, really solid fans in the world.
That's so nice. I really like that. Authors love that, don't they?
I don't know yet. I think so. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, before I was an author, I used to think you didn't do that. Like, I would think, you know, you certainly wouldn't approach anyone famous in any way. Not that I'm famous, but, you know, anyone well-known, you wouldn't contact them, you wouldn't text them, you wouldn't email them, you wouldn't, once social media was on, like, I just thought that was off limits. But now that I'm on the other side, I love hearing from authors. I love hearing feedback. I love hearing their own stories about their own writing and how that's going. And I love contacting other authors from books that I've read that I love and telling them, because
I'm getting better at that. It's hard. It's easier if it's like someone I talk to the whole time. But if I haven't spoken to them before, it's still a little nerve-wracking, because and this is me thinking, I don't want them to think that I want something from them.
Yes.
Before I was a writer, that would have been easier, even though it would never have occurred to me. But now, once you start writing, I guess you kind of think, I'm not doing this because I want a leg up. I'm not doing this because I want anything from you. I just want to express.
You're just giving them some feedback and some praise, which is lovely. And it doesn't matter how well-known and famous people become, they still really appreciate that, I've discovered. Even the writers who are really successful, inside they're still, you know, there's still imposter syndrome, and
I'm learning, that they all seem to have the same problems, no matter how.
We all do. We're all the same.
Far out. And so you must have met some really amazing people in your career.
I have, since I've been published and started doing a lot of events, and just becoming more involved with the writing community.
So when did you start interviewing people? So was that after you were published? As I said, I'm very new. I do apologise. I feel like...
Yes. No, that's all right. So I wasn't published till 2015. And before that, I really knew nothing about anything. I didn't know anybody in the literary scene. As I said, I hadn't studied it at uni. So it's been all since then, and probably really only the last couple of years that I've really started to do a lot of interviewing, mostly through Avid Reader. Although I did a state library talking ideas spot with Tara Moss, which was really fun. So that was a bit of a fangirl moment. But I've interviewed, so many great Australian authors, from Kate Grenville to a lot of crime writers, Gary Disher and Michael Robotham, and so many. Yeah, a lot. Vicky Laveau Harvey, just after she won the Stella. So a lot of authors. Yeah.
Do you get more nervous? Like, you never seem nervous ever, but I know that sometimes people don't look the way they feel, and
no, I do get nervous. I think it's more like an adrenaline thing. So I guess the bigger the name, so Graham Simpson, I was quite nervous, but of course he turned out to be lovely. Jane Harper, we did at the Greek Club, so that was big because there was, I think, 250 people or something, and I was very nervous about that. But again, of course, she was lovely. So I think you just discover they're all just people, and
Is your worst fear that they won't talk? Like, for me, I guess probably my worst fear is that I'll get someone who's just basically doesn't have a lot to say.
Yes, that is probably the worst thing. If they just give one word answers or very short answers, or you're really having trouble drawing them out on things, that can be quite difficult. I haven't really had anyone that's been, unpleasant or or not very nice. It's more just sometimes people are a little bit quiet, and often writers are quiet. They're not extroverts, and they find it hard to be up on stage talking about themselves and talking about their writing. So I try to get a feel for what you sort of know from knowing a bit about the person beforehand. You get a sense for how they're going to be, and then you plan your interviews accordingly. So I know that for some people, I will just have to basically, I say, just turn them on and give them a little push and they're off, like the Energizer Bunny, they're just, you don't have to step in. You just occasionally bring them back to the point, or but other people, you'll need to have a lot of questions ready, and you'll have to be prepared that they'll give fairly short answers, and you'll have to keep, drawing them out on different.
Do you read there in your grandmother's chair? Or on a couch?
Sometimes I do, but often it's a bit noisy in here if everybody's home, because this is in the lounge room. So I'm often just in my bedroom, on my bed. Actually, that's my favourite reading place, sitting on my bed, especially in winter.
Do you sit up? Like, my hands, I find it really hard to hold books. I have dodgy hands.
But I sit up. If I lie down, I fall asleep.
You go to sleep? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Same problem. I nearly bought on eBay a pair of glasses, and it has a mirror, like a periscopes, so you can lie down with facing the ceiling, and it will mirror what you're holding here. Oh my God! They've never arrived, so I probably didn't click buy.
I think that's weird.
But so you could lie. I have a really bad neck. I could lie like that and read, but I don't know if I could concentrate properly, because I would know the whole time I was lying on a bed wearing periscope glasses.
Yeah. I even find the little, I've tried the little book lights that you attach to the pages, but I find even that's it's just quite annoying.
Uneven lighting.
Yeah.
So it'll make it like bright at the top, and then it just is dark at the bottom, so you end up taking them off, and that won't work. No, that won't work.
Gadgets are overrated, really. You just need the book and a light.
And a lamp.
That's all you need. Yeah.
And so you sticky note your books. Do you write in them as well?
I don't usually write in them. Although I have to say, Megan Daly's Raising Readers, I wrote in that. And I sent her a message and said, I don't know if you'll think this is a good thing, but I have completely defaced this book. I did it, and then I gave it to my daughter. And, it was it was highlighted, and there were notes in the margins, and because I just think it was a great resource. But mostly with books, I do sticky notes, especially if I'm interviewing or if I'm writing a review, because I review everything I read pretty much.
Yes.
Everything.
And really good reviews. Everyone should check out your reviews. I'll try and link somewhere because they're really comprehensive.
I really enjoy writing reviews because I like thinking about what I've read, and also because it helps me as an author. I think it really helps me to articulate what I've read, what I liked, what I thought worked, what didn't work for me. If the author's used some sort of devices that are structural things that I find interesting, I find it really helpful to kind of pick that apart a bit and write about why that's happened. And I'm very careful to write reviews with no spoilers because I think it's important.
Well, when so many people look to you for what to read, I guess it becomes a responsibility to not.
Yeah, I think so. And I like the idea that people look on my website or on my Facebook page and they can read a review that's quite extensive. So usually between 500 and 1,000 words, so a reasonable length. But it's not giving away anything, but gives you enough of a feel for the novel. It's not just a synopsis. It's something about what happens, but it's also about the themes and the characters, and maybe it's sometimes about what I loved about it or what I thought didn't work. But I think it's enough to give people an idea so that they can quickly look through and go, yes, I'm adding that to my TBR list, or no, that one sounds like it's not for me. And because I read quite widely, so I do literary fiction, I do crime, I do YA,
young adult.
I do young adult.
Made my day. I think it was. I can't remember the first young adult thing of. I know when Holden Shepherd came and
yes,
you were interviewing him. That was probably the first time it really occurred to me, and I thought, she's doing it. She's got a young adult author, and just treating us with the same respect that you treat the literary fiction and the genre fiction.
Absolutely.
And I was like, that's the first time it occurred to me that I might be able to ask you myself, because I was like, what do you do in a young adult?
No, it wouldn't occur to me that YA would be, that you would treat it any differently, because I think YA is such an important genre, not only for young adults, but for adults as well. I just think it's a whole, it just plugs into the psyche of a time in your life that is critical and pivotal and formative, and the themes that YA generally cover are just so important. So I love reading YA, and I do occasional non-fiction as well, or memoir, biography. So I like to do kind of a fairly wide variety.
I can't stop it now. You have to tell me about the grant and your next book.
Yes. So I did get an Australia Council grant 2 years ago, which was amazing and such a wonderful thing. I was actually really sick with the flu when I got notified that I had it, and I was lying on my bed and I got the email, and I thought I was hallucinating. I kept reading this email thinking, this can't be right. But anyway, so that book is currently with a publisher because I got an agent recently too. So that was the other big thing that happened at the end of last year. So I signed with Alex Adset.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Congratulations.
On the strength of that manuscript. So she's the one who's been putting that out, and there's somebody interested at the moment. So fingers crossed. Keep your fingers and toes crossed.
Good luck. You're in good hands with Alex. She will totally look after you.
Yeah, she's like a firecracker. She's really great. Yeah. So I've got that. I've got non-fiction writing that I've done for the Saturday paper. I did that quite regularly for a while, and I've still got a few things out on submission to various journals. I've done some children's writing that's out being considered at the moment.
That's great.
So I like to mix it up a bit, and
you're going to have to be doing a lot more interviews on the other side soon.
Maybe there seems to have been a long gap, and I think during this this strange COVID time, I really felt like it was my I mean, a lot of people were saying, it's really hard to be creative at the moment because there's just so much going on and it's very anxiety producing and whatever. And I found that too. But I also felt like it was a responsibility to really support those writers who had books coming out now. So I really put a lot of time into reviewing and organising Q&As or interviewing authors who had books coming out, in the last few months, because
you must have been flat out, because you guys are all together with Avid, but then also with you, because you've got the background work there with everything. Have done so much. I don't know what I would have done without you there, but I don't feel like I missed out. I don't feel like I missed out on my launch, and I don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no people worry that I'd be all, oh, you didn't get to do this.
In some ways, it was even better because with the Zoom launch, you can have so many more people that wouldn't physically be able to come to a Brisbane launch, for example. And I know particularly with neurodiverse people, a lot of them were saying, I wouldn't go into a bookshop to an event. Like, it's just too much.
It is a lot. I do them, but I have to be, you can't do very many, sometimes because it's mostly because of just all the stuff that goes around it. If you could just teleport, as we always in my family say, when will the teleporters arrive? Yes. If we could just teleport and land there, we're fine.
For the event and then leave. But you've got to do the whole have a wine, chat to people, chat afterwards.
I don't mind that. The bus. I have to get the bus and I have to walk the whole length of the West End. And so by the time I've got to the bookshop, I'm processing about a million things I've seen. And because the West End is a really interesting place for people who don't live in Brisbane. Yeah. Phenomenal place. But you'll always see something that makes you go, okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't, if you don't go out a lot, and I'd especially not at night. I hadn't been out at night for a long time because kids and everything. And then I started coming to these events, and as an autistic person, their routine, you arrive, I figured out you arrive at this time, but that's when you get there and then you do this. Yeah. So don't expect to walk in and sit down and it starts, and then you can do this. And it's okay to browse the bookshelves for ages looking a little bit awkward because everyone's doing that.
Everyone's doing that. Yeah.
Pounce on someone that you know. And but then the same thing would happen at the next event. And so I could relax. And then once I know what's going to happen, then I can be myself. And
and it was so nice that day when we'd only known each other on Twitter, I think. Or I think we'd met once before, but ages ago. And
when I jumped on you at the State Library.
Then you came.
Well, I came to Ben Hobson. Yes. Ben Hobson's event.
And you came up to me and said, hello, I'm Anna. And that was probably hard for you, but that was so good for me because, it's hard on Twitter. There's these tiny little pictures of people and you don't really get a sense of what they look like. Like for me, I really need to meet. It really helps me if I meet someone in person and can see their face. And
yes, and then marry the two things together because I may know the Twitter person and I may know the person I've met, but I may
don't realise they're the same people.
Realise.
But I am looking forward to when in-person events are back at Avid and at bookstores, I have to say, because I think there's a real vibe about being with your tribe and being in that literary space and having other writers and readers around you and the bookstore staff. So it's not even actually just the interview and the chat that you might be there for, but it's all the people that you see before and after, and catching up with what people are up to, and if they've just won an award or been shortlisted, or if they've just finished a draft or whatever it is that they've done. It's great to be able to catch up in person with that.
It is lovely, and you get all the stocking fillers that you need because you will buy the thing you saw on the the little things. So many fabulous little
on
a family of readers. So it's great, endless little the knickknacks.
Everything
on
from
the sucker
socks
for those
to bookmarks to
and they're just like great. And I put them all in my little box of
your present box.
I am my grandmother. I have a present box. Now we've come full circle back to the grandmas. I'm going.
That's right. We're back to the grandmothers.
Thank you so much for coming on OzChat, Cass.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's just been delightful. I've been waiting for this for so long, and it's finally happened. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.